Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome senior writer, Wired, Cade Metz.
Good morning. I think it's safe to say that not too many people face the scaling challenges of Facebook, but it's safe to say that certainly there are many companies that are approaching that. And today we're going to talk with three guys who work for three of those companies. Let me introduce Sam Scilacci, who's the Vice President of Engineering at Box, Kevin Scott, Vice President of Engineering at LinkedIn, and Yamshid Madavi, who's a software engineer with WhatsApp, the company recently acquired by Facebook. Come on out, guys. I think a good place to start to kind of show the arc of how we're evolving on the internet in terms of this type of technology is to start with Sam. Sam, a decade ago, your company, which made a tool called Writely, an online word processor, was acquired by Google. That became Google Docs. Is it safe to say that when you were acquired and saw the way things worked in terms of the Google infrastructure, that was an eye-opener?
Totally.
That was done differently?
Oh yeah, totally. It was kind of the fun part about going there was like you get to see the flying carpet, although the magic flying carpet back then wasn't quite the magic flying carpet it is today, but it was still pretty amazing. So we one of the things that was cool that's interesting to watch over the last decade is all this technology that used to be proprietary to Google that nobody knew about, that we got to use when we built Google Docs is now public. So you guys know about Docker and you know about Kubernetes and you know about a bunch of different things like that, etcd, all this stuff. Those are all kind of analogs of internal Google systems, the container world, the automated scheduling world, all of that stuff. The DevOps world was what they were doing, and it was super cutting edge at that point, and now it's kind of the mainstream thing.
So just generally, how much of that do you take and apply to your own infrastructure and mix and match using those tools that are available?
Now as much as we can. Box is starting to use Docker, and we're starting to do containerization. I think that's kind of the state of the art now. Like when Google bought us, the state of the art was bare metal machines, right? You had some sysadmin somewhere. We actually had a sysadmin in the Philippines, I think, managing our hardware, and that was you'd actually rent individual machines one at a time and configure them yourself. And then you went to Google, and it was like this compute cloud. So that's what everybody does now. It's what AWS is now. It's kind of the same thing. So that's absolutely, that model is so much better than what it was before.
So Kevin, in terms of scaling, you're a bit further along than Box. I would imagine it's a similar story, though, that you came along at a time when a lot of this technology was readily available in terms of open source and other sources.
It's actually really amazing. So I had sort of the opposite experience of Sam. So I was at Google planning to leave to do a startup in 2007, and like one of the anxieties I had at the time was like, oh, well, we have all these amazing proprietary tools, and like when I left, like by 2007, like the open source ecosystem like already had solved like big problems like Hadoop, so distributed file systems, MapReduce were available to use, and like you sort of look at the state of things today, it's really incredible. And at LinkedIn, like we're big enough where we consume a bunch of stuff. Like we're going through a big initiative right now to replace most of our web application front ends with Ember. Which is just this amazing piece of front-end technology that the community has created. But like we also highly encourage all of our people to contribute the work that they're doing back to the open source community. And like we've got big successes like Kafka, for instance, that tons and tons of people are using as their messaging transport. Like we are at.
You like it?
Yeah, many hundreds of terabytes a day of data get sent around with Kafka at LinkedIn, and other folks are using as well.
Is there a way of easily describing, when you're going to choose something that is readily available in open source and when you're going to build something like Kafka? Or is it done on a case-by-case basis? Is it just about finding a problem that hasn't been solved, or is it more complicated?
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at it on a case-by-case basis. Like there are, we try to be careful enough to look at things and try to understand like where they're going to need to be scaled over the next 5 years, and then we look at things that we could buy, we look at things that we could adopt from the open source community, and then we look at the option of building, and like we try to make a ROI estimate. And like sometimes it's just like clearly the right thing to do to build your own tool. And like when we're building our own tools and there is a wider need inside of the community, and like there's nothing super proprietary about what we're doing, like our tendency is to like, let's open this up as soon as possible.
So the irony with Jamshid here is that WhatsApp is now used by 900 million people worldwide, and they use almost none of that stuff. You guys have a very, I think it's safe to say, a unique infrastructure, at least very different than what you typically see. Is that
Yeah, that's right, Cade. I started at WhatsApp 2 years ago, and I had the pleasure of coming in to see really a completely different way of building a high-scale infrastructure. It was kind of an eye-opener to see the sort of minimalist approach taken to just solving very focused the problems that need to be solved and doing it in a very efficient and performant way. And so we've been able to do some great things in our server infrastructure with bare metal FreeBSD servers, and Erlang is our language of choice for server development that have allowed us to scale with a very small number of servers and a small size team to a really large scale of end users.
I think the choice of Erlang is particularly interesting, and I think it sort of plays into a larger trend on the net, which we'll get into. But why, in particular, was that chosen? Erlang, for those who might not know, was a language developed in the 80s at Ericsson. It was developed for communication in particular. You guys obviously deal in communication like so many companies, but it is very closely associated with the sort of thing that Ericsson was trying to do, correct?
Yeah, that's right. No, we to some extent kind of fell into Erlang when the company was being started. The messaging application needed a foundation, and there were several open source choices available, and the founders looked at the ones that best met the needs of what we were trying to build, and that turned out to be one that was written in Erlang. And even though all of the guts have been replaced now, the Erlang part of it proved to be just really valuable, and so that was something that was stuck with for the duration. They were in fact able to actually essentially completely replace the guts of the system while it was running, using some of the capabilities that are built into Erlang.
Like I said, this is part of a larger trend, and I think, Sam, you can talk about this. What we're seeing is a movement towards languages that are particularly good at parallelism. Facebook famously started out with PHP, and as they scaled, it was clear that the language wasn't necessarily going to scale with it, and they ended up building a new virtual machine to run PHP called HHVM. You guys now use this, and I think you're on your path, on a path at least, towards using Hack, which is their language, has similar attributes.
Yeah, I was thinking about this actually when Kevin was talking about answering the question about like when do you decide whether to build versus use something out there. So we use HHVM, and we went through kind of a long journey with it. When we looked at it originally, probably 2 years ago, it wasn't really ready yet to use, and then it got close enough to be ready, and we worked with Facebook and made it work for us and like contributed back to it and stuff like that. So like just to that earlier question of whether when do you decide whether to build something yourself or use it? I mean, that's something obviously we couldn't have built. So it was good to contribute to it, and then we've got other stuff that we have built and contributed out, like our test framework. With Hack and HHVM, like that's a really interesting challenge. I think that Erlang is obviously the right tool for that job. I think that's what you always look for, is like matching the tool or the language to the problem at hand. Our problem is similar to Facebook's. So we have a big PHP code base that we have to deal with and maintain. So you want to try to get a little bit of type safety into it and a little bit more structure into it. Hack's a really nice option for that. So it solves that problem really well, but it might not solve others.
Got it. And how about LinkedIn, Kevin? Are there particular language choices that you've made, or is that as big of an issue for?
Yeah, I mean, so I think language choice is it's a huge issue for any company that's, like trying to do software at scale. And like there are two aspects of scale. There's the, like how many people do I have writing code in this programming language, and how well does the language and the set of tools that are built around the language sort of support collaborative development. And then there's like the technical aspects of the language, like, does this thing let a team of developers sort of very efficiently solve the particular technical problem that you're going after. So, so much like, Box, like we are and have been for a very long time, mostly a Java shop, which, has, good things and bad things, to go along with it. But for us to contemplate changing, like to like become a Go shop, for instance, we have tens and tens of millions of lines of code that would have to be rewritten in the new language. But like we do use Go, for instance, a lot. Like it's a really great language for writing general purpose like high volume servers, and like we're using it at a bunch of different places inside of LinkedIn.
That's a good language to bring out, because in addition to languages like Erlang and maybe even Haskell, which Facebook uses for its anti-spam system, which are old languages that are sort of being revived in some ways.
Yep.
We've got new languages that are seeking to tackle these problems. Go is one. The other one is Rust.
Yep.
But Go is a bit further along.
Yep. Well, and we're using so like we're in the midst of writing a bunch of new mobile applications for iOS, and like the teams are using Swift for that, which is slightly nicer than Objective-C in my humble opinion. So like I think there's just constantly going to be like interesting new programming environments that are going to be out there for the us all to use. Like the trick is like figuring out like when it makes sense to like sort of officially support one, like in a like a big team of developers, because their costs changing.
Now, one of the advantages of sticking with Java is that there are so many Java developers out there. One of the drawbacks of Erlang is that there's, relatively speaking, not as many. I mean, is that a big problem? Do you have problems recruiting people?
So our strategy around recruiting is to really find the best and brightest engineers, bring them in. We don't interview specifically for, this engineer must know Erlang. We kind of, on the server team, we really expect a new engineer to come in and to spend their first week to get familiar with the language and learn to use the environment. But if you hire smart people, they'll be able to do that.
Yep, right answer.
Yeah. Good programmers can learn new languages.
Okay.
I think the language dogma, I think, is a little bit overrated too. I mean, I've never seen a language. The WhatsApp example with Erlang is probably the strongest example I've ever seen of a language really making a big difference to an engineering program product's efficiency. Like usually, teams are roughly the same effectiveness. I think Go is a good example. Like Go does, certain things really well. It's much more, much more effective, but it's not a panacea. It's not, they're all kind of the same, the same at some level, and they're just kind of pick the right tool for the right job.
Yeah, and it's really easy for programmers to get super excited about a new language. I mean, like I remember, like I was once a programmer in my 20s, and like I was like really excited about Snowball and Icon and like all of these great languages, and each new one that that I learned was going to be the best ever and like solve all of my problems. And like at some point you disabuse yourself of that notion.
Right. I mean, I guess the other thing
Still
there
fun to
is.
remember Oberon.
Yeah, Oberon was awesome.
But so, some have steeper learning curves than others, right? And at WhatsApp, I mean, does that learning curve come into play? I mean, you still, if you don't know it, you have to learn it, no matter how good you are. And I mean, how steep is that learning curve, and is that an issue at all?
For at least for what we're doing on server team with Erlang, it's we tell people we expect them to learn Erlang. Obviously people know coming in that that's what they're going to do, and we haven't ever seen a problem with someone picking that up. Yeah.
I guess. Go ahead.
So the other thing I'd add is like it's interesting. Like when you are doing software development at large scale, like even if you have a language that you think lots and lots of people know, the sort of conventions of programming in the language and the tools that are used to support it are going to vary significantly by company.
Yeah.
Like we had we had a 35-page style guideline for C++ at Google, where like we promptly outlawed like half of the things that you could do with the language, and like that was sort of the idiomatic way that we programmed with C++ at Google. So you had to learn that.
That's really true. Every company does develop kind of their own idiom.
Yeah.
That you're programming almost in that company's language.
Yep.
Scala is great for this.
Yes.
Right.
Scala is like such a big language that everybody has their own way of using it. So we do too.
I guess another result of this trend is that we didn't have so many other languages that are being used, and does that create scaling problems in a sense? If you move into too many languages, I guess it could be technical problems as well as organizational
Tooling.
problems.
Yeah.
Creates tooling problems.
Tooling's a massive problem. I mean, so like we have, I won't say the exact number, but like, significantly in excess of 1,000 people who are like coding in the same code base at LinkedIn. And like we have a tools team that's awesome who is, there to sort of support all of the things that we need to do and all of the languages that developers do. But like there's a limit to how many we can actually support and like do really well, because there's a continuous integration environment. There's, like all of the, sort of testing infrastructure and frameworks that you use. There's the, deployment infrastructure. There's, like how do you do like really fast distributed builds? Like, how do you, do dependency management in languages like JavaScript that don't have, sort of first order dependencies in the language. So like there's all this stuff that you end up having to, build for yourself, and you have to, at some point like make hard choices. Like we recently like decided to disallow the use of Scala for sort of new front-end applications at LinkedIn, because we couldn't figure out how to support it in a world-class way with the tools team that we have.
I see. And what about organizational issues, Sam? I mean, are there particular things you have to think about as you're scaling technically in terms of people?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's actually, Kevin can talk about this too. Like as you go through different sizes, you almost have the same problems at each scale.
Yep.
Like the same, I'll get asked to come and talk to companies, and there's like the 12-person problem set, and there's the 30-person problem set, and there's the 80-person problem set, and there's the 300-person problem set. Like you kind of go up these layers of scale. There's different challenges in the organization. Some of them have to do with propagating information. A lot of them have to do with propagating information through the culture. So when you're really small, you can tend to just do everything brute force, and everybody kind of knows what's going on. It's pretty easy. It's pretty flat. As you get bigger, you can't really do that the same way. Like that n-by-n problem doesn't work the same way, as hard as you try. So you'll see stuff where you get to about 100 people, and the organizations start to really struggle to propagate all the information they need to where they need to do it. And you get to 300 or 400 people, and now you have to start siloing information, because everybody can't listen to everything all the time, even if you can propagate it, because there's just too much stuff. And so you have to figure out how to do that and in a way that scales, where you're not creating dysfunctional boundaries and things like that. So tons of stuff.
One of the things that organizations also are not good at, I mean, it's so like we as engineers, like I think like to decompose things into independent units. And so like when you're trying to build a software development team, people have this tendency to like, all right, I'm going to create like these little silos of teams, like where they have relative autonomy, and like sometimes your problem gets so big, or like it is of a nature where you can't be completely siloed. Like you can decompose problems into like a bunch of different teams, but like the teams at some point still have to collaborate. Right. And like a lot of companies don't invest as much as they should in like teaching folks how to collaborate. I mean, it's understandable. Like we're engineers, like we like to solve technical problems, but like sometimes there are people problems that need to be solved as well.
I don't know if you have this, but I have a program management group that exists just to figure out where all the hidden dependencies are and help manage these multi-team projects.
Yeah, I'd say one thing that a company can do is try to design with good modularity in mind, so that you can sort of delay those scaling problems as long as possible, organizational scaling problems.
Absolutely.
When we're coding, we're often thinking about things like how do we deal with locks and lock contention, and you have exactly the same problems within the organization. So that to the extent that you can cut down on dependencies between different projects,
And for God's
and
sake,
let
make your
people
code
just work.
readable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just let people just work
Strong contracts.
without needing to do a lot of cross-team interactions.
Yep.
That'll make your development more efficient and let you scale a lot farther with fewer people.
For sure.
Again, there's an irony at work here with WhatsApp. Like I said, you're now sort of 900 million people worldwide. You've got 50 engineers, is that right?
We're about 50 on the engineering team.
So I don't know. Is there we have very little time left, but is there a way of succinctly describing how that works? I mean, are there lessons that others might be able to learn from the way that you have done things?
I mean, I think the number one lesson is just be very focused on what you actually need to do, and don't spend a lot of time getting distracted by other activities, other technologies, even things in the office like unnecessary meetings, things that take away from just the focus on getting to the goal that you're trying to accomplish.
You almost never have a meeting at WhatsApp. Is this true?
We're a pretty meeting-free culture. Yeah.
Got it. Simple advice, but good advice. Guys, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.